Welcome to interview number 2 of season 4 for the Perfect Par podcast. This time I am joined by nutrition expert Benn Fineman. Ben has worked in the fitness industry for over 12 years and runs a wellness company called Intuitive Roots. We discuss the fundamentals of nutrition for athletes, primarily golfers, including hydration, macro and micronutrients, calories, clean eating, how eating can help recovery, electrolytes, and even a mock tournament day eating plan. If you're looking for a way to gain an edge against your competition with nutrition, this episode is golden. Let's jump right in. Well, Ben, thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Carter.
So I know I had you on the podcast, I guess it was almost 2 years ago now, which is crazy. But for those who listened to that episode, can you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Benn Fineman. I'm based out of the Philadelphia area. I'm a personal trainer, strength coach. I also do nutrition coaching. I work in corporate environment for a lot of like my full-time gigs. So right now I'm actually working for a private logistics company and working with their employees, training them, doing a little bit of nutritional coaching and some other wellness initiatives. But I also have my own training business called Intuitive Roots. I would say primarily fitness training, as well as nutritional support as well. So, I have a range of clients under that as well. And I've been working in the fitness industry since like 2009. So years are really starting to stack up. But yeah, I've worked with everyone from just your general average person trying to improve their fitness, to athletes, to kind of everything in between. Worked with some elderly population, younger people. So kind of a wide range of clientele that I see. So,
Yeah. So with most people I have on the podcast, a lot of the topics we talk about, they have a general idea of, what we're discussing. I don't think that's truly the case with nutrition. I think a lot of people know it's important, but they don't really know where to start. So I guess a good place to start today is, what are some of the basics and fundamentals of nutrition?
um, yeah, that's nutrition is such a broad topic. I would say like for the average person, so there's differences. Someone who's an athlete are going to have a lot different nutritional demands than the average person. I would say generally a lot of the people that I see that aren't athletes, weight loss is the main concern. I think that's the majority clientele I see. People want to kind of lose weight, get healthier, and just improve their overall health. So I think for the average person, it just starts with a little bit of education and awareness. I think, and apologies if you hear my dog barking. Um, I think for the general person, we don't have a great educational system for nutrition in this country. So I think that is kind of a good starting point. It just, unless you kind of seek out on your own to really do the research and kind of understand what healthy eating is, a lot of people just don't have a good framework for it. Maybe you just didn't grow up in a household where healthy eating was a thing, or a variety of reasons, but the nutritional education in this country is not good. So I think a good starting point is just kind of understanding where calories come from. That would be your macronutrients. So the three plays calorie really comes from three components. You have protein, you have carbohydrates, and you have fat. All the calories you consume your entire life have come from those three components. They all have a little bit of different effects on the body. So carbohydrates are going to be your body's primary energy source. So that's what your body looks for immediate energy to break down and use from, everything from, kind of just like household activities of daily living, simple things to, the hardest athletic training. So carbs are your primary fuel source. Then you look at fats; they're kind of your long-term energy source. I mean, all of these things have various, a lot of different.
Right.
They have a lot of different things they do in the body, a lot of different processes they regulate. But for the main part, fat's going to be your long-term energy source. It's also obviously what kind of protects your organs, kind of helps make the structure of your cell walls, helps regulate hormones. So a lot of different things that fats do for the body. And then you have proteins, which I think a lot of people are familiar with. They're kind of like the building blocks of your muscle tissue, and they also comprise a lot of other structural components in the body with other tissues. But you kind of need a balance of all three to have a healthy lifestyle. Now there's a lot of different, I think that's what can be confusing to people at times. There's a lot of different nutritional protocols. You have everything from your ketogenic, which is very low carb, to almost no carbohydrate at all. Um, you have high protein diets, you have low fat diets. There's a lot out there, and I think it's very confusing to people. So I think from a good baseline, if you kind of look at, all right, I'm trying to get healthy, I'm kind of starting out on a new eating practice, what can I do? So looking at the portion size of your meals is a very important thing. Looking at the content of your meals, I would encourage people to really focus on eating whole foods. And that basically means things that are as close to their natural state as possible. So, your meats, vegetables, fruits comprise the majority of your whole food sources. And then outside of that, looking for things that I would consider minimally processed. So the food industry does lots of tricks and other things they do to kind of, add flavor to foods, add certain things to foods. And a lot of these things aren't the healthiest for our bodies. So, what I would consider a processed food is something that's been really altered from its original state. Um, Take something, I don't know, like white rice, let's say, something like brown rice or whole grain bread. If we're looking at like wheat and grain, it's got a lot more things that are going to be good for your body. Whole grains, it's got a lot of good minerals in it. When they make something white like bread or rice, they strip and bleach and take a lot of the essential nutrients out of it, leaving you with stuff that's still going to provide you calories and energies, but it's just not going to be as sustainable. Whole foods typically are going to take longer to digest, so they're going to give you more sustained energy. Um, and processed foods, one, are going to do things like drive your blood sugar up. A lot of them have a lot of sugars added. I would say sugar's like the number one thing to really be cautious of in your diet that can really have an influence on, everything from your insulin levels to, just your overall energy. Processed foods typically will give you energy for a short period. They're going to spike your blood sugar, spike your insulin, especially stuff with a lot of that added sugar. And then if you, don't go and exercise and clear that insulin out of your bloodstream, it just kind of sits. And then over the course of time, that can lead to things like prediabetes and diabetes, because your body has so much insulin always circulating in your bloodstream that, your body becomes resistant to it, and then you can't produce it as efficiently as you once did. So, things like that are all to take into account. So trying to build your diet around more whole foods, fruits, vegetables, lean protein sources like meats, eggs, dairy products. Some of them aren't the best. Some of them are good. We can get into that then. But again, with dairy, you just got to really look at sugars and, how your body responds to it. Some people are fine with lactose and other things in dairy. Other people have a tough time digesting it. So you might want to look at more like plant-based milks if, you're going to drink that. Um, yeah, but really kind of trying to build, so 3 meals a day, your breakfast, lunch, dinner, I would say for the average person is a good starting point. Getting a good breakfast in the morning, trying to put a good calorie source so you have nice energy to carry through the day. Having, another meal at lunch, kind of like a good midday refueling. And then again later at night for dinner. If you can really kind of stick to that, I know that's kind of the quintessential structure most people are used to, but modern society, we're busy, we have a lot of stuff going on. It's very easy to skip meals. It's very easy to just go for what's convenient. And what's convenient, we know, isn't always the best choice when you look at things like fast food or just, different like microwave meals. All those
Yeah.
things, highly processed, not a lot of healthy things in there. So, really trying to build 3 meals a day based around whole foods. And you and I, you're familiar with kind of the precision nutrition method because we've worked on that together. They're an organization that I'm certified through, and I put a lot of faith in. They're a really good certifying body for anyone who's looking to become a nutrition coach. But they also just put out a lot of good nutritional information for the public. And I really like following their system when it comes to portion sizing because that's a big part of how you're intaking calories. So depending on your body size, your age, the demands of your lifestyle, we all kind of need different calorie loads depending on, all those things I just mentioned. So looking at building a meal, it's, hard to say, like just looking at labels, like, all right, how many calories is this? So the system that they use that I've found works really well is a hand measuring system. So when you look at what's a serving, so a serving of protein would be about the size of your palm. So about that size. And what's good is your body's scaled to you. So, the size of your palm is going to be, adequate for yourself. The size of my palm might not be the right portion for you, but, you can kind of use your own body as a measuring system. Then you want to look at your vegetables. 1 to 2 fistfuls of vegetables is good to get at every meal. And vegetables do a lot of things as far as our nutrition. One, they have a lot of good minerals, antioxidants, vitamins, vegetables and fruits that our body needs to regulate a lot of different things, a lot of processes going on in the body. So it's really good to get that. And the other thing that they kind of help with is just feeling fullness. So vegetables and even protein on that matter. Vegetables have a lot of fiber, and fiber is kind of one of those things that helps your body can't digest it. It kind of just gets pushed through your digestive tract. So if you eat a lot of vegetables, have a lot of fiber in your diet, it's going to fill your stomach more. And the way that our body kind of regulates appetite is the amount of volume of food that's going through our stomach. It's not just calories. So you could eat, the same serving of vegetables, same size of potato chips, and the vegetables are just going to make you feel fuller longer. And they're putting low calorie food. Vegetables are typically a lower calorie food as compared to a lot of different fats and other carbohydrates. So if you can get a good portion of vegetables on your plate and get that in with your protein, and then just kind of do like a smaller cupped handful of carbohydrate, whether that's rice, potatoes, different kind of grains. That's a pretty complete meal because the vegetables at a lower calorie load, filling your stomach up more, it's going to make you feel full, and it's just not going to put a ton of calories in you. You obviously need, the amount, an adequate amount to sustain your activity and everything. But, overeating typically occurs when you eat a high calorie food that doesn't necessarily fill your stomach up.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not full. So then you're going to eat more. And, like processed carbohydrates are something that people typically can binge on, whether you're eating potato chips or pastries. They don't really fill up a lot of volume in your stomach until you eat a large amount. And by that time, you've consumed a pretty enormous amount of calories. And then,
Right.
10 minutes later, you're sitting there, your stomach's full, you feel sick. So, kind of tying that all together, if you can get those 3 healthy meals where you're getting, 1 to 2 palms of protein, and that's obviously going to vary, on all the variables that I just mentioned. But if you can get those 3 meals with your protein, a couple of handfuls of vegetables, and then a serving of carbohydrate would be about a cupped handful. So if you can do 1 to 2 of those on plate 3 times a day, and then the times in between meals, you might want a snack to kind of hold you over. And that's, it's good to have some healthy snacks in between meals. Now, you can obviously get into unhealthy things, but stuff like fruit, maybe doing like apple with some kind of nut butter, just trying to get all the same things, trying to get some protein, trying to get some healthy whole foods just to kind of hold you over. And a snack is really just kind of hold you over between meals. So, you don't want a snack that's like 500 to 600 plus calories. Like 200 to 400 calories is normally adequate. So that could be a lot of things. Maybe that's like a Greek yogurt to get some good protein. Maybe that's like, small omelet. I mean, I think people need to kind of change their thought process on what is a snack, because I think a
Yeah.
lot of times when people think about snacking, they think unhealthy things like a lot of stuff I just mentioned, cookies, chips, a lot of that processed junk is
Mm-hmm.
really what it is. So if you can kind of get those 3 healthy meals each day, and also get a couple healthy snacks to hold you over in between the meals, that's a pretty good framework to start. And then from there, then it's really kind of breaking down the content of your food and seeing where you can do a little better and improve. um, but instead of, and one of the things precision nutrition really kind of drives home is like, I think people need to stop looking at foods as good and bad and kind of look at it on more of a continuum scale of, okay, this is not the best choice, this is a little bit better choice, and this is the best choice. And,
Yeah.
you don't always have the time or, the situation you're in that you can make the best pot to make that like best choice, but you,
Right.
you try to do as best as you can based on, where you're at. I know it's tough when you start traveling and, if you have a busy work day. So sometimes, it might mean, getting up a little early, preparing a protein shake that you can just quick blend up and drink while you're driving into work, or something like that. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the basis for building healthy meals, and then kind of, slowly just trying to improve the content of those meals and seeing, where you can maybe add a few things in to kind of to help. And that's for the average person. Obviously, people with nutritional deficiencies, athletes, might need to kind of mix things up a little bit and change things up. But I think that's a good framework for starting.
Right. So something that gets talked a lot about in athlete circles are macronutrient splits, or essentially where your calories are coming from in your
Hmm.
macros. What do you think a good split is for athletes?
So athletes, if we go again to like looking back at the demands of an athlete and what how energy is used in the body, carbohydrates being your primary energy source, they should be like the if you're an athlete, the highest scale the highest scale macronutrients. So your carbohydrates should comprise, I don't know, roughly like 55 to 60% of your overall diet, and then you can, add in protein around um 25%, and then the remaining percent with fat. Fat is not all that it doesn't influence, I guess, like building muscle and your overall like energy as much as carbohydrate and protein do. Carbohydrate's going to have the biggest impact on helping with building muscle and kind of replenishing your energy stores. So carbohydrates are the number one source for your muscle tissue. So your muscles store carbohydrate in the form called glycogen, and that's kind of like what your muscles use as energy when you're working out and exercising. So it's good to replenish that like right after a workout. And I know we're going to probably get into kind of more workout recovery nutrition, but in general, like 55 to 60% carbohydrate making up the larger portion, getting 25% of protein, excuse me, and then filling in the remaining with fat. It's, pretty good balance for an athlete.
Yeah. So we've talked about macronutrients. Of course, the opposite are micronutrients, where you don't need as many of them, but they're still important. How much should someone pay attention to those and measure those compared to the macronutrients?
Yeah. So, one of the nice things about micronutrients is most of them you can find fairly adequately if you're eating a healthy diet. So, again, if you're getting all your servings of vegetables, if you're getting, some servings of fruit throughout the day, you're going to get a lot of those micronutrients. So, that would be more your vitamins and minerals. Minerals help regulate a lot of different processes in the body as well as vitamins. Vitamins kind of make up more your antioxidants, which, help defend against cell death and certain cell processes, just maintaining the healthier cells. Um, so if you're getting a lot of fruits and vegetables, you probably don't need to do a whole lot of supplementation. But I would say that if you can do like a good daily multivitamin, usually helps make up for a lot of that stuff. So I prefer like the chewable because they dissolve more and they can get right in.
Yeah.
Some of the There's some out there that they just kind of like pack into these rock hard pills, and sometimes they don't even get fully broken down your digestive tract, and they just kind of exit your body not completely broken down. So
Okay.
I like I like multivitamins. Like the gummies are a good way to go about it. They dissolve quicker. They can let your body absorb them a little quicker. But yeah, just like a daily multivitamin, it's going to hit on a lot of things that you might not be getting in your diet. They're packed with pretty much there's about 17 essential minerals you need in the body, and most multivitamins, are going to have that in there.
So,
So I think that's a good starting point. And then, I mean, if you're really want to dive deeper, you can go and get like blood work done and kind of, get like a full panel test, and you can actually see like where you're deficient. So maybe you're, I don't know, deficient in vitamin D or calcium, which tends to be the case with a lot of people. So, you might need to like specialize in the vitamins.
yeah.
You might just need like a vitamin D3 and calcium supplement, and that might be enough. So, if if you feel like it's something that you need to dive deeper in, there are a lot of options out there for going and kind of getting that blood work and testing done. There's a lot of different companies that you can either go and have blood work done, or send it in, and they can kind of analyze where you're deficient.
Yeah.
So that's always a good route if you want to dive deeper.
So, in addition to a multivitamin, are there any other supplements you recommend for athletes specifically?
Um, yeah, I guess sometimes it depends on the sport, and like what exactly the demands of the sport are. But a good whey protein is probably the most basic and simple and effective supplement you can take. It's great for post workout recovery. You can get, nice powders that you can just blend with either water and drink right down, or maybe mix with like an almond milk or something and blender and throw some other stuff like fruit in there to get a little more carbohydrate in. But yeah, I think a good like whey protein, if you're doing a lot of strength training, is beneficial, especially if you like can't, go and eat like a good meal right after a workout or training. I would say whey protein is a good supplement. Creatine is another good one. Creatine is kind of like your immediate energy source. So your phosphocreatine system is what gets depleted, and that's really just used in like real quick motions that take a few seconds. So you'll burn through that phosphocreatine. Supplementing with that after workout will help with muscle building. It's good in combination with the protein powder. Um, and then if you want to look at like endurance type activities, where you're like out for multiple hours, maybe you're running a marathon,
Golf.
maybe like yourself where where you're playing golf
Yeah.
and you're walking 18 holes and it's hot. That's then you start to look at hydration and replenishing electrolytes. So there's a lot of good electrolyte supplements out there, and we can get into that stuff a little bit more, but that's where like that kind of supplement, sports drinks, which some of them are pretty good, others not so great if they have a lot of sugar in them. But good sports drink like during competition, during activity will help make sure you have all the nutrients and calories and energy to kind of get you through that endurance activity. Like on the middle of the golf course, maybe like around the ninth, 10th hole, it's good to do like, a drink that has some electrolytes, some carbohydrates, some protein in it to kind of help sustain your muscle tissue throughout the workout, make sure you're not breaking down too much muscle and kind of get you to the end of the competition. So, I'm not, to be honest, huge into supplements. I think if you, can build your nutritional routine and, as we talked about earlier, get a lot of those healthy whole foods. Supplementation is not something to get crazy about, but I think when you're an athlete and you're really pushing it, like especially within competition, some of those things I just mentioned will be helpful for just sustaining your energy level and then helping you recover after the event or the competition. So especially if it's like a multi-day competition where like yourself, where you might have to play 18 and then wake up early the next day and do it again. Starting to think about replenishing that stuff like immediately will help the next day that you're fully recovered going into your next round or whatever event you're doing the next day.
Right. So you mentioned hydration. I think everybody knows it's important to drink water, but not everybody knows
Sure.
why. So what is the science and why is it so important for you to stay hydrated?
Well, so the adult body is comprised, men typically have a little more muscle, so they're about our 60% of your body weight is water. Women about more around 50%, since men carry typically a little more muscle and there's a lot of water that gets kept in muscle tissue. But so your body's, essentially over half your body weight is water.
Hmm.
So it just helps regulate. I mean, water is kind of the fluid that helps, all of the um, systems in your body like exchange like different micronutrients. So like the water in your cells is what's help exchanging like all those electrolytes and other minerals. So like your cells have these little pumps in them that kind of help send these minerals and vitamins and all these little things on a micro level in and out of the cells. You kind of have these pumps, and water is the main mechanism that's helping allow the flow of this. Your blood, you need water to just maintain your bloodstream and just have enough fluid in yourself. If you're really dehydrated and you don't have enough water in your body, a lot of your systems are not going to be functioning optimally. So when you talk about producing hormones, just all the things you need on base level to maintain homeostasis, which is just basically what your body, needs to function under general circumstances. If you're dehydrated, you don't have a lot of water, you're just not going to have, complete function, and, it's going to suffer. You're not going to be able to perform athletically. You need a lot of water in your muscle tissue. So a lot of that water kind of gets utilized, in different processes during exercise and even when you're at rest. And when you exercise, you sweat, you start to lose body water. You lose water through evaporation. Just kind of like talking, there's, different water molecules that are coming out of your body every time you go to the bathroom, you lose a little body water. So it's good to replenish that just to keep all the processes in your body kind of running smooth. So water is kind of like the baseline. Without water, we wouldn't be able to survive. It kind of, makes up a lot of the weight of our body and regulates a lot of different processes going on.
Yeah. So, for example, let's say, I'm playing golf or one of the listeners is playing golf. It's 95 degrees outside, which is not uncommon in especially the Southeast. How do you stay hydrated while you're playing besides just drinking more water? What else can you do to stay in an optimal state?
Yeah. So, and I've taken some notes here, but I mean, I guess for starters, when you're in the environment you just talked about, when it's real hot and humid. So I guess I'll start with, let's look at the mechanism of sweating. So sweating is basically a physiological process that your body tries to do to lower your body temperature.
Hmm.
When water evaporates, when sweat kind of gets pushed to the surface of your skin and evaporates, it causes a cooling effect on the body. Now, when you're in a hot, humid environment, like you just explained, and you're sweating, but the sweat's just kind of like dripping off you and it's not evaporating. If you were in a drier environment, um, that's not good because your body is not cooling down. Then, if that evaporation is not occurring, your body's not cooling down, which means you're going to need even more fluid because the fluid you are putting in is just kind of evaporating. So, when you exercise, there's a competition for blood flow between the working muscles and the skin because your body wants to push a lot of your blood to the skin so you can release some water and it can evaporate and cool you down. But your working muscles also need that water. So that's why one of the reasons during athletic competition it becomes really important to stay hydrated. And on top of that, when you do sweat, you lose a lot of these things called electrolytes. And electrolytes are basically just these electrically charged molecules in your body, minerals. So, the most important ones being potassium, sodium, chloride. Those are the ones that you typically tend to lose a lot through sweat. And again, as I was saying before, like on the micro level, a lot of the little pumps that you have in the cells of your body that kind of control the flow of water in and out of cells are controlled by these little ions. So they kind of attach and they can kind of control the flow of water in and out of the cells. So if you start to lose a lot of these electrolytes, your body and the way it kind of moves water and gets it to the working muscles in and out of the cells just becomes hindered. And then you're not going to be able to perform as well. So when you talk about hydrating for competition, hydration does not really start the day of the competition. If you want to be adequately hydrated, you need to start thinking at least 48 hours before your competition. So for the average person, about 100 ounces of fluid a day is adequate. Now, if you're an athlete, it's a little more. I would tend to say like about an ounce of water per pound of body weight, which can be a lot. So, I mean, I recommend people just getting a big water bottle that they carry around with them a lot and just sipping on it as much as you can so you're staying hydrated. Um, and that's going to allow time. So you have within your body what we call extracellular fluid and intracellular fluid. And the intracellular fluid is the water that's actually on the inside of your cells, and the extracellular fluid is just kind of moving around outside of the cells. And as we were kind of just talking about, like it needs to get into the cell on that micro level to kind of allow some of these processes with the electrolytes to happen, for muscle contractions to occur, various other things to happen. So when you don't like take the time and kind of hydrate slowly and allow that exchange of extracellular fluid into intracellular fluid, and then you just try to do it like, let's say the day before the competition, like, all right, I'm dehydrated, I'm just going to try to pound a gallon of water. Well, you're not really giving if you're doing that like right before you get, like, maybe let's say an hour before you go out on the golf course, your body is taking in such a large volume of water that it just can't get it all into your intracellular fluid adequately. So what's going to happen is you're just going to pee most of it out. Your body's like, all right, we just got this huge influx of water. We can't take all this water all at once and move it into the cells. It takes time for that to happen. So what's going to happen is your body's just going to kind of flush you out, and you're going to urinate most of it out, and you're not going to be hydrated because all that fluid you just put in is going to get lost pretty rapidly because your body's just going to try to flush it out. So that's why when you're talking about hydrating, you want to try to do it kind of slowly and steadily over the course of a few days leading up to the competition. When you're talking about the day of competition, so when you wake up, you want to start getting some water in you right away. So before competition, try to get like a liter of water in would be good. And then, throughout the course of, it's obviously going to vary depending on the athletic event, but I guess for purposes of this podcast, we'll kind of talk more about golf. But, so let's say it is one of those hot 90 plus degree days. It's real humid. You're out on the course. You're going to start sweating a lot and you're going to start losing a lot of body water. And, you want to drink water, but eventually you're going to lose electrolytes. You're going to need to start replenishing those. So that's where your sports drinks comes in. That's where your electrolytes come in. I guess the main difference between an electrolyte supplement and a quote unquote sports drink is a sports drink's typically going to have some carbohydrate in it, because over the course of your round, you're going to start, burning through a lot of energy and you're going to need to replenish carbs. So that's kind of the thought behind a sports drink like Gatorade or Powerade or any of those. They do have electrolytes in them, which are good for your body to use, but they also put carbohydrates in them, and that's normally in the form of sugar, which isn't the best. I would encourage, like, there's a lot of other electrolyte supplements that have a little bit less sugar. And then, you could get your carbohydrate from another source, like maybe just eating some fruit stuff. A lot of times you just don't necessarily need those sugars. Now, it's one thing in competition, you're going to burn a good amount of them off. But if you're not doing an exercise longer than 60 minutes, you don't really need all those sugars. Now, in your case, when you're out on the golf course, like a Gatorade, Powerade, not the worst thing in the world, but I would look more to doing like an electrolyte supplement that has a little less sugar, and then getting like carbs and proteins through more whole food sources, or like just solid foods, or you could like mix a little whey protein in with a sports drink, kind of shake that up and have a little bit more of a blended drink. Um, and you would want to do that, maybe midway through your round. You don't have to be doing it the entire round, but like every hour, just try to get a little bit of that protein, carbohydrate, electrolyte blend in you would be adequate. So that way, you're going to sustain your energy. Your muscles are still going to be able to perform. That's one of some of the telltale signs of dehydration. The first and most obvious is thirst, and usually by the time you're thirsty, it means you're already dehydrated. Thirst is a mechanism that just kind of lets your brain know that, hey, like, we need more
Hmm.
water so we can regulate all these processes going on. But other things, muscle cramping is usually a telltale sign that you're dehydrated and you're probably starting to be depleted of electrolytes. Because when those electrolytes get depleted, it definitely hinders the ability of your muscle fibers to contract. And when they can't do that, obviously your performance is going to be hindered. And then a lot of times the muscles will start cramping because they're simply not getting, the water coming in. They're not getting those other electrolytes. So all those processes going on that we mentioned with some of those like sodium and potassium pumps that are helping move those substrates and water in and out of the cells just aren't going to be working as adequately. And then your performance is going to suffer because your muscles won't be able to kind of perform up to the way you want.
Right.
So definitely good to stay on top of it. When in doubt, just, keep sipping on that water. And then, like I said, every hour, try to get a little bit of protein carbohydrate blend and some electrolytes in as
Yeah.
well.
So, of course, there are electrolytes not only in water, but in certain foods. How does your body absorb those electrolytes differently, or does it do it completely the same?
It's the same like it's not all that different. They can be a little bit more quickly absorbed if you're just like mixing a powder. If you look at the way body breaks down food, food has to obviously, go through your digestive tract, starts in the stomach where, it's going to start breaking down some things, but usually those carbohydrates and some of the electrolytes aren't really going to start getting absorbed until they get into your intestinal tract. So if you're eating a whole food, it's just going to take a little longer. So like that's why out on the course, like the electrolyte supplements, anything that's liquid can typically move through your digestive system, and then it just doesn't need to be broken down as much because it's already in liquid form. I mean, that's essentially, all the stomach acids and the things that get released in your intestines start to break down into smaller chains. So if you look at a molecular level, like all your three macronutrients, they kind of start in these larger forms of food, and then as your body digests them, it breaks them down into smaller components until they're into single cells. So like the smallest form, like sugar is just basically the simplest form of carbohydrate. It's just single molecules, and that's really, once that gets in your bloodstream, those sugars are, what can kind of flow through and get sent to the muscles and other places. So the more solid a food is, it's just going to take longer for your body to break down. So, like, if you want to get electrolytes through food sources, I would start trying to eat them earlier in the day at breakfast. Um, and I have, a list here of some foods that are, um, good, full of electrolytes. So I'll just rattle off a few here. Things like some of your dark leafy greens, spinach, kale, broccoli, avocados, potatoes, beans, almonds, peanuts, strawberries, watermelon, oranges, bananas, tomatoes, yogurt. A lot of your essential electrolytes, sodium, chloride, potassium, calcium, you can find in a lot of those food sources. So again, going back to whole foods, that's kind of why we stress that, because whole foods typically have a lot of these naturally occurring things and components like electrolytes and vitamins and minerals in them. So the more of those you can eat, the less you're going to need, your supplements. But in the case of competition, when it's hot, you're limited on time. You just need to really get it in you. That's why the liquid sources work well, because your body can kind of more readily absorb and get them to where they need to
Yeah.
go. Ideally, if you have the time, and I would prefer whole food source, but in the middle of competition, it's just not convenient to be eating a lot of food. So that's where the sports drinks really, come into effect. You can just get them in you quicker, and then it's just easier for your body to digest. You don't want to eat like a huge meal in the middle of a golf
Right.
round, and then it's going to take a few hours for your body to digest that. So, and I guess that we can also get into then like thinking about breakfast.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna and let's look at the day of a competition. So if you're like, looking to plan a meal, if you're gonna eat like a big solid meal, I would try to do that like 2 to 3 hours before your competition to allow your body a little more time to digest.
Okay.
If you're gonna go more the sports drink route, I'd probably do that like an hour before competition. You could do that. So maybe you're just gonna like blend up a shake with some protein and fruit and some other things and blend that up and drink it. You could do that a little closer to the time of your competition, kind of for the reasons we just got into. It's just going to be a little bit easier for your body to
Yeah.
absorb. Personally, I would, prefer to probably do like a larger meal a few hours before, let your body get some of those whole food sources, break it down, and then kind of like lean on the supplements like as you actually get into the event or the competition.
Right. So when it comes to electrolyte supplementation, is there a certain ratio of supplementation to water you would recommend? For example, every 32 ounces of water, you use one serving of supplementation.
Like 16 to 20 ounces of water, usually like one scoop of electrolyte, and I forget how many grams that is, but yeah, typically like one scoop of your electrolyte supplement, and you mix that with like 16 to 20 ounces of water is usually adequate. Um, and then you might need a little bit more water or liquid if you're going to maybe add like a little bit of protein powder in, which is also I think a lot of people just kind of think as protein as like post workout, but it's actually pretty effective like intra workout. If you can, again, you don't want to eat something that's like real heavy and going to sit in your stomach, but that's where like your whey protein powders kind of can work nicely, because you can take like a scoop of whey protein and a little bit of electrolyte supplement, put that with some water, shake it up, and then you have a pretty complete sports drink that you can kind of take with
Yeah.
you. So from that standpoint, you don't want to like drink it. Obviously, like, when you're out on the course, you might not be able to, there might not be a bathroom nearby. So you don't just want to be pounding water the entire time. So, you got to be mindful of things like that. But, 16 to 20 ounces is usually good. And then, if you notice yourself sweating a lot, try to take in more. But also, the color of your urine is actually a good indicator, one of the best indicators of how hydrated you are. Darker, more yellow urine means that you're a little dehydrated. You should probably get some more fluid in you. If it's a little more clear or just like kind of a fainter yellow, that usually means you're pretty adequately hydrated. So, you know, not the most pleasant thing to mention, but it's definitely like a good indicator of, when you're urinating, you can kind of use the color of your urine to kind of determine, how
Yeah.
hydrated you are.
So I was listening to another podcast the other day, and before they would start their competition, they would weigh themselves, see their weight, and then after compare their weight, and however much was lost, they took half of that, and that's how much water they consumed after the event. Is that
Hmm.
something you would recommend or something similar to that?
Yeah, yeah, and that's a great scale. Typically, if you lose like 1 to 2% of body water, that's where you're going to start to feel the effects of like diminished performance. So let's say for like a 100 pound person, or let's say 200 pound person, like 2 pounds of water loss, which seems like it might take a lot to lose 2 pounds of water. But again, if you're out there kind of grueling through competition and it's really hot, sometimes like it's hard to notice how much water you're actually using. But so yeah, that's a good scale to go by. But yeah, like it doesn't take a lot, like just 1 to 2% of total body water loss, and you're going to start to like really feel the effects of
Yeah.
dehydration. So, yep,
So we started to talk about it a little bit earlier with the breakfast, but I want to kind of talk about what an ideal meal schedule would look like on a day of performance, whether that be a lot of practice
sure,
or a tournament. How do you do that? Starting maybe the night before the tournament all the way till after.
sure. So let's look at the night before. Definitely, want to get a good, adequate dinner in. And a lot of it is kind of what we were touching a little bit on before. So getting a good, adequate protein source just to make sure all your muscle tissue is replenished and you're putting enough protein in your body. If you were, training the day before or it's a multi-day competition, you broke down some muscle tissue, you definitely want to get a good, adequate protein source in. Um, Probably going to want to do a little more carbohydrate. That's where the whole theory of like carb loading comes in, where you can kind of like leading up to a competition deplete a little and then kind of like overhaul the carbs going into it and try to really like drive a lot of carbohydrate in your muscle tissue to kind of really build up your energy stores. So carbohydrates definitely important. Um, Fat again is like the least. I wouldn't eat like a real fatty meal the night before, but fat's not going to have a huge effect. Now, I wouldn't eat like a lot of fat like the morning of, just because fat's the slowest macronutrient to digest. So if you eat something that's like really rich in fat, it's just going to take longer for your body to kind of break down and kind of clear from your digestive system. So, I mean, you want like a little bit of a healthy fat at a meal. So, you know, um, good carbohydrate source, like you're probably going to want to do more than just your 1 to 2 cupped handfuls. You might want to do 3 or 4 just to make sure you're getting in a good base of carbohydrate. And again, like more the whole foods. So like your brown rices, your potatoes, things that are going to digest a little slower, and they're going to have more minimal minerals and vitamins in it that your body can kind of utilize to prepare you for competition. So protein anywhere from 30 to 50 grams is adequate for most people, especially going into competition. Um, and then with your carbs, again, like probably 3 to 4 cupped handfuls, and then like a little bit of fat. So like some good natural fat sources. From like a plant perspective, like could be something simple as like oils. If you're having like a little side salad, a little olive oil on it. Avocado is a good source of polyunsaturated fats. Yeah, I think that's like if you can get a little bit of that, good, healthy serving of carbohydrate, and then a couple palms of protein is good. So, and I know that's it's hard to like put that into context, but let's talk actual like what a meal could look like. You might maybe do like a little bit or a couple like a cup or so of whole grain pasta. Maybe have like some kind of protein source. So if you're gonna put like some sauce on it, maybe have like some ground turkey with it, and then like some vegetables like broccoli on the side, and that's a pretty good adequate meal right there. So just kind of getting all three of those macronutrients, but before and after competition, really focusing on the carbs and protein. So making sure you're getting good adequate portions of that.
Yeah. So then we talked about a little bit about the breakfast before the round, and
Mm-hmm.
then actually during the round or immediately before, most golfers will get to the course an hour, hour and a half before their tee time to warm up. So maybe in that time, what do you
Mm-hmm.
eat, and what do you eat throughout the round to try and maintain your energy levels as much as possible?
Yeah, so some of the stuff like you and I have worked on in the past, fruit is a really great source of food to eat throughout, because fruit doesn't really, depending on what it is, like I wouldn't eat like a super high fiber fruit, but like, stuff like oranges, banana, watermelon, strawberries are all great things that you can kind of eat to give you, they're going to have some
Hmm.
electrolytes in them. They're going to have water in them, so they'll help actually hydrate you as well. They're going to have some good vitamins and minerals in them. So fruit is good. To get protein in you, like things like I guess you also have to think of terms like what's convenient and what's portable to
Right.
bring with you on the course. So some things might make a great, workout, or might make like a great food source for protein and carbohydrate, but they might not just be convenient to have out on the course with you. So trail mixes are good, especially getting like some of that salt back in you. So having like some nuts with maybe some
Hmm.
dehydrated fruit and things like that. Yeah, jerky is a great protein source. It's pretty dense, whether you're going to do beef or turkey. That's also going to have some sodium in it. Um, and yeah, I mean, that's one of the things we kind of touched on with electrolytes, but sodium is, you lose a lot of sodium through sweating and through
Hmm.
urination. And that's kind of one of the electrolytes that gets most lost through those things. So, sometimes having like a salty trail mix or jerky that has a lot of sodium in it, um, you might not want to overload on that if you're like not doing an athletic
Right.
activity. But when you're in the middle of competition, having something with some salt in it is good. Other things you can do, like your, bars are convenient. Stuff, I would try to get stuff that's a little bit more like naturally sourced, like Lara bars are good, RX bars are good, because they're derived from a lot of like fruit, and they use, stuff like molasses and things that aren't necessarily quite as processed sugar heavy. Um, that's, my issue with some certain bars. They just pack a lot of sugar in them, and sugar is going to spike your blood, it's going to spike your blood glucose and your insulin really quick.
Right.
But the problem if you load up on sugar during competition is you're going to get that crash.
Yeah.
So that's why you kind of want more sustainable carbohydrates. So, I mean, there's a lot of sugar in fruit, but that's more naturally occurring. So your body can process that a little easier, and it's not going to have quite as an effect on your blood glucose and insulin. So yeah, I mean, all that stuff is good, but I would try to build it around that and maybe have, um, like a little lunchbox or something you can bring along that you just pack full of snacks and you can kind of just eat throughout the course of your round. But I would say maybe like every 45 minutes, try to, depending on how you're managing the sport drink, you might be able to get a lot of your nutrition through like your sports drink or your electrolyte supplements. But, adding things like the bars, the fruit, some trail mix, some jerky are all good ways of, getting some good, like sustainable energy and to kind of keep you
Yeah.
pushing through the round.
And how should you structure like what types of foods and the macros you eat throughout the round? Like, is there a certain type of food you should eat earlier in the round compared to later in the round? Because on, on a good day, you're out there 4.5 hours. Most it's going to be five, 5.5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like, every hour I would just try to get like a combination of like all of them, like 45 minutes to an hour, try to get, that blend of like some carbs and protein. Again, fat is one of those things, like if you get a little bit during the course of, like there's going to be some fat and nuts and, other things that you're going to eat like that. But I just won't go too fat heavy because, you don't, again, want like sitting in your stomach and taking a long time to digest, because you don't really want your body putting a lot of energy toward digestion when they're in the middle of athletic competition. So that's why carbs are good, because, your body can put them immediately to use. And then the protein is actually going to help sustain your muscle activity. So, again, like every 45 to 60 minutes, just try to get, some of those snacks, like some fruit, like all kind of all those things in combination. And then again, like that sports drink we talked about, mixing like a little whey protein with some electrolyte supplement, and then to get some additional carbs, maybe just eating some fruit along with that would be good. But just trying to do like a little bit of that. I wouldn't say you need to do like just protein for the first four holes, then switch to
Okay.
carbohydrate. I would just say like make sure that you're getting, like on the hour, throughout the competition, a little bit of protein, carbohydrate, and electrolytes. Just kind of keep steadily putting those into your
Yeah.
body throughout the round.
So after the round, what should you be doing to make sure you get your caloric needs and help you recover for the next day or the next 5 days in some tournaments?
Sure. So, I mean, your post recovery meal shouldn't be all that different from, what you're eating in the morning. You want to try to get it within like 1 to 2 hours of competition, just so like you kind of have this metabolic window where you've just pushed really hard, your muscles are really depleted. So that first 2 hours, you have a nice window where if you can get some of those calories into you, your body's going to be able to instantly take those and start putting them towards recovery. So, and that's things like getting the carbohydrates back in your muscle, getting the protein. A lot of it's based around your muscle tissue because that's really what breaks down during competition. So, good post workout meal is a lot of what we just talked about. Definitely getting adequate sources of carbohydrate and protein. Again, fat, get a little bit of it. It's not going to be something that you need to like overload on to prepare you for the next day. I would really focus on the protein and carbohydrate, and then the fat will just kind of usually be filled in with other foods that you're kind of building your meal around. But again, like a good like pasta or rice based meal where you're going to get a good load of carbohydrates. Starchy vegetables are always good. So things like squash, sweet potato, what was it? Yeah, like stuff like that. That's just a little more starchier. Different forms like butternut squash, stuff like that. That's a little starchier, but has like good, good source of a lot of your vitamins and minerals. Trying to get a lot of those micronutrients in as well. So, the macros, you want to look at your protein and carbohydrate on a micro level, just getting a lot of those vitamins and minerals back in. So that's where like the vegetables and some fruit are going to come in. Like for dessert, you might want to, if you're going to have like dessert, you might want to do like just like a cup of fruit or some kind of like fruit cocktail. I would just try to avoid, like a lot of your processed stuff, like, the morning of and during your recovery. A lot of that stuff is not going to be all that helpful in your recovery, and it might even derail you because if you're putting bad calories in your body, like sugar and junk, it's just going to kind of hinder some of the vitamins and minerals that you're trying to get into your body. So, avoid things that are really high sugary, avoid like, the bad fats like fried things,
Yeah.
pastries, donuts, cakes, like all that stuff that kind of more your unhealthier fat. I would try to avoid things like that and just kind of focus on kind of your more healthier whole food sources. Um, that'll be pretty good for getting you prepared the next day. And then again, start thinking about your hydration right after the competition. Right after competition, try to get another liter of water in you and just try to be steadily drinking water throughout the night. Probably like 8 ounces every hour at least. And then same thing when you wake up the next day. So, you kind of, especially when it's a multi-day event or you have to do an event and then go into training the next day, start thinking about it immediately and not just like, oh, all right, I'm going to go relax now. Like, if you have a serious competition, as soon as you get off, I mean, do what you need to do right after, shower, do that stuff, and then start thinking about like, all right, where am I going to go to get
Right.
the meal? And as we've talked about a lot with nutrition, planning is a
Hmm.
huge part of it. So when you think about like the day of competition, the day after, write down, build a plan for yourself, like kind of like build like we've done before, like, okay, I'm going to wake up at this time. I want to have breakfast here. So maybe you're staying at a hotel. Okay, does that hotel serve breakfast? Like some hotels, you can go down, they might have a nice breakfast platter. Some, I would say avoid because it's just
Yeah.
going to be a lot of pastries and stuff. But if you can find one that might have like eggs and fruit and things like that, oatmeal, that would be like a good starting point. But if not, like, all right, am I going to be at home? Can I make a good meal? Am I going to have to stop at a restaurant? So kind of have to plan those things out. As you know, like the less planning you do, the less
Right.
prepared you are, the less chance you have of being successful. So I think any nutritional strategy, there's a lot of planning that goes involved, but especially with athletes because they have to think about all the logistics of game day, like or competition day, like how much, kind of like what you were saying earlier, like all right, how much time am I going to spend warm ups? What time do I need to be at warm ups? So you don't want to eat like a huge meal and then hop into warm ups like 15 minutes later. So you have to think a lot about the timing, how long it takes to digest like solid foods. And it might be like, all right, I'm gonna have to wake up, I need to get right there. You might not have time to like go eat like a big meal of like
Right.
eggs and like an omelet with some vegetables and other stuff. So you might just have to make a shake and use like some whey protein, put some fruit in there, maybe like some spinach or
Yeah.
kale and almond milk and blend that up. But so the logistics, and then same thing after, are you away? Is there a good restaurant where you can get a healthy meal that you're not going to just have to grab fast food on the way home? So the planning is a big part of it, and just kind of like knowing when you're going to eat and knowing like the timing of how soon you can eat before and after the event is a
Yeah.
large part of it as
So,
well.
what is your advice for continuing to eat well when traveling? Because most all events, especially the big ones that actually really matter, you're going to be traveling. You don't always know the
Hmm.
restaurants that are in the area. What is your advice for that?
Hmm. Um, so I mean, do some research. Look up. I mean, it's easy enough to hop on Google, see the area you're staying in. Maybe you're staying in a place where you have a kitchen and you have a little bit more leeway to actually prepare a meal and do some cooking, which is ideal. If you don't have that, if you're just staying in a hotel room, I would, look into packing things. So, you definitely want to have all your snacks prepared for while you're on the course, but, maybe that means like just packing some protein bars and, that I would prefer to have, like a more whole food, like omelet with some potatoes and other vegetables. But if you can't do that, you might just have to eat a protein bar and, maybe do some kind of like pre-made protein shake in the morning. So I definitely research the area, like try to set yourself up that if you can like get a good whole food source like a few hours before the competition, that would be ideal. If you can't, if you're really pressed for time, that's when like your supplements and like the more convenient things are going to come into play, like your bars, like the pre-blended protein drinks. Like you can get some good pre-blended protein drinks that have 30 grams of protein. They'll have some carbohydrate, and they usually fortify those with some other vitamins and minerals. So that might be your best option, but you know, just kind of like look at where you're staying, look at the situation. I know, like, I'm sure you're probably, in places sometimes that are a little desolate. There might not be a lot of restaurants around, or you just might be in an area where, like, the grocery stores might not have the best food. So, do your research. If it looks like it's going to be that situation, then I would just plan to bring a lot of stuff with you. Even if it's somewhere you have to fly, you can throw like some boxes of bars and some other stuff in your luggage and just have them
Yeah,
ready to go. So just do your research, plan ahead, and just try to kind of like look at either restaurants or staying somewhere, or maybe specifically look for like a hotel that you have like a little kitchen that you can like prepare some food and do
yeah,
some cooking. Um, so yeah, I mean, just like anything else, research ahead, plan it out, and just kind of have a plan for the day instead of just winging it. Usually, if you're winging it, then you're kind of just
right.
relying on chance, and as you know, it's hard to be successful when you're just
Yeah.
relying on pure chance. So
So when you're, trying to get all these calories in, 4,000 calories probably on average for most people, how do you get all those calories in while still avoiding, processed foods and staying in whole foods? Because if you look at just vegetables and chicken, it takes a lot of vegetables and chicken to get to 4,000 calories.
yeah, definitely. Um, that's where fats can come into a little more play, and like we talked about, you don't necessarily want to like overload yourself with fat, but so kind of going back to looking at macronutrients. So um, carbohydrates and protein produce about 4 calories per gram, whereas fats produce 9 calories per gram. So fat is definitely the most dense
Hmm.
macronutrient as far as the calories it provides. So when you look at before competition, chicken and vegetables, yeah, it's going to be you're going to need to eat a lot to get those calories in. So maybe you go with a little bit fattier source of
Okay.
meat like beef or pork or something that has a little bit more fat in it that you're going to be able to get some more calories in you. Like vegetables, you could add in like some olive oil, you could add in a little butter to get some extra calories. But I would just try to look for the most nutrient dense, like calorie dense sources. So, things like your potato, like carbohydrates, you can get a lot of calories from. So if you're eating like potatoes, sweet potatoes, you can get some good calories through them. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely difficult. So I would try to, get some maybe like cut some meat that have a little bit more fat in them. Like if you're eating like let's say like you're gonna eat like some turkey tacos, put some
Yeah.
avocado on them, get some fat there. Yeah, I mean it's definitely difficult, and then that's where you might need to do like some shakes and stuff to get those extra calories in. So maybe you eat a breakfast and you're just like I can't put any more food in my stomach, but I know I need more calories, so maybe like an hour later you blend up a shake and just get some calories in you that way. So I think when it's difficult to eat like a lot of whole foods or like a lot of solid foods in a short frame of time, that's where your liquid calories can come into play. So that's where, some of like these blended drinks or like making your own protein shakes, you can cram a lot of calories into a shake if you want. Like you can put, and it doesn't necessarily have to be unhealthy things. So you can put like a lot of frozen fruit into a shake. You could add things like we just mentioning, like avocado. You can put, like other things like some flax seeds, some hemp seeds, chia seeds, things like that. They're going to give you additional energy, but are also going to give, some extra calories as well. Like unsweetened coconut flakes will give you some good,
Hmm.
healthier fat calories. So, things like that, getting some liquid calories and shakes, I think can go a long way for people that are finding it tough to get it all from like your,
Yeah.
naturally sourced whole foods.
So if we move away from the golf course and competition and more towards training, specifically in the gym training, how can you support your body
Mm-hmm.
for muscle growth and speed gains with nutrition?
Well, I mean, it's not all that different than athletic competition. Training is a little more controlled environment, so I would say you have a little
Hmm.
bit more control over, like the timing of your nutrients. But again, pre-training, just try to get like a little bit of protein and carbohydrate in your body. So let's say you're gonna, go do like a strength workout at 9 o'clock in the morning. You wake up at 7. Like try to get maybe like a bowl of oatmeal, banana. You can maybe like mix some like peanut butter, whey protein in with your oatmeal, so you get a little bit of fat and some extra protein in there. Um, excuse me, could be a shake, but you definitely want to get some calories in before training. So that way, like your body has some energy to burn during your training session. So definitely getting like a good source of carbohydrate before that. And again, if it can't be whole food source, then look more to those liquid calories. But I would really prefer to, try to get like a solid whole food meal in like before training if you can. So, um, eggs are always good. Might have a little whole wheat toast and like a cup of fruit on the side would be like a good pre-training meal. And then after the workout, it's similar, just trying to get like the protein and carbohydrates in. So again, you have like that 2 hour metabolic window that you really want to try to maximize your muscle gains and kind of get that stuff in you as soon as you can. So if you have time and you can get home and eat like a good meal after that, but um, again, like a lot of it isn't going to vary. It's just getting like a good protein source, getting like a 3-to-1 carb protein ratio typically. So if you're like blending up a drink or something, let's say you have like 20 grams of protein, you want to try to get around 60 grams of carbohydrate. So that's like a good guy, like a 3-to-1 carb to protein ratio after a workout is pretty adequate. For making sure that you're going to get everything you need in for muscle recovery and just having energy to finish the rest of your day with everything else you have to do and then prepare
Yeah.
yourself for the next day of training.
So something I know a lot of people who listen to this podcast struggle with, and is, I think mainly because there's a lot of information on the opposite, is weight gain. They're looking to put on a lot of muscle and a lot
Mm-hmm.
of weight. What should their game plan look like in doing that?
So, carbohydrate, I think, contrary to a lot of people's belief, they think it's all about just loading up on protein. You do need to up your protein a little bit, but at the same time, like for building muscle, you actually need to up your carbohydrates a lot because, again, carbohydrates are kind of the fuel for your muscles. So if you're looking to build, you want to up your protein a little bit, but definitely up the carbohydrates as well to just give your body more energy to burn or energy to utilize for building muscle tissue. Um, but at the same time, it's kind of going back to the same thing. Like look for good like natural sources. So again, like all your whole grains are good. Like for carbohydrate sources, everything we just talked about, like your whole grain pastas, brown rices, potatoes. I keep mentioning those because that's kind of what I utilize for like a lot of my carbohydrate intake. Things like that. Try to stay away from like your white breads, white rices, that kind of stuff. That's not going to have all that much nutritional value. Look for the slower digesting carbohydrates that your body can pull a lot more minerals and vitamins from. Stuff that's faster digesting is typically going to have less nutrients in. So, I mean, your body can uptake those carbohydrates and use them more. But as far as like longer sustainable energy and pulling a lot of vitamins and minerals and all those micronutrients that are also going to kind of go into effect with some of those processes that goes into recovery and building muscle tissue. You want to make sure you're getting a good amount of them. So, um, again, like a good, you know, like muscle building meal, like you just up the, like instead of doing like 1 to 2 cup handfuls of carbohydrate after a meal, up that to 3 or 4, maybe even 5. And I think that also gets in the conversation of body type. So you have your ectomorph, mesomorph, endomorph. Your ectomorph is going to be someone who's typically like a lot leaner. They're sometimes what people will call a hard gainer. It's typically a little bit more difficult for these people to build muscle mass. You have your mesomorph, who are people who just kind of have like that natural muscular build that they can put on muscle very easily. Um, and then you have your endomorphs on the opposite end of the spectrum, who typically can gain weight and muscle very easily. They have a tough time losing weight a lot of the time. So, kind of like looking at that, someone who's an ectomorph, you're probably going to need to eat a lot more carbohydrate and up your protein a lot to get that muscle gain. Where someone who's a meso or endomorph probably can still build a good amount of muscle, just kind of doing a more adequate intake of carbohydrate, up in the protein a little. Some people's bodies are a little bit more responsive to carbohydrates. So I would definitely say kind of try to get an idea of what your body type is, and then that can help kind of like dictate like how you're going to build your meals. But again, just kind of, you always want to get like the 1 to 2 servings of vegetables. You always want to get the 1 to 2 palmfuls of protein. But if you're looking to build muscle, like up that protein to maybe 3 or 4 palmfuls, and then like 3 or 4, even 5 cup handfuls of carbohydrate. Again, using your body portion as a scale, but a lot of that is just going to help dictate the meal. It's not necessarily like you have to change the amount or change the content of what you're actually eating, but you might just need to like increase the proportion sizes. To build muscle, you need more calories. To lose
Right.
weight, you need to take in less calories. I mean, it's kind of, it's simple, but it's not. I mean, it's simple. It's not easy. Like when you look at it, you lose weight when you're burning more calories than you're taking in, and then you gain weight when you're consuming more calories than you're burning. But when you're doing a lot of like high um, activities where you're breaking down a lot of muscle tissue and like high endurance type activity, you're just going to need more calories to replenish. So that's why, like after working out, you want to definitely up your
Yeah.
carbohydrate and protein
Is there a
intake.
magic number of calories for weight gain you want to have above your basal metabolic rate?
For building muscle, yeah. So, above your basal metabolic rate, like maybe like 500 to
Okay.
1,000. Again, it's going to depend on your body type. It's going to vary. It's definitely going to vary per individual. But if you're someone who's like looking to build muscle, so like we just talked about building the meal structures and kind of what your portion sizes would look like. Just kind of start small and build up. So, maybe that means adding like 1 palm full of protein. So that could be like maybe an extra half a chicken breast or beef or fish or, whatever your protein source is. And, let's say like you're eating like some quinoa as your protein source. Maybe you just start by doing like 1 more cup handful and then kind of see how that goes. See, are you putting on muscle? You're not, okay, then maybe that means, all right, let's add in another cup handful. I mean, a lot of it, you're just going to kind of need to play around with and just kind of see what works for you. What works for me might not work the same for you because we have different body types, different ages, different physical demands. So, yeah, like I would say maybe like 500 to 1,000 calories above BMR, but
Yeah.
that's definitely going to vary. But, in simple terms, just try to like slowly increase like the proportions of your carbohydrate and protein, kind of see how that's, how your body's responding to that. And then, maybe you need to, add a little more. And on the other end of the spectrum, if you're trying to lose weight, same thing, like maybe cut out, 1 cup handful of your carbohydrate. Since that's typically what's going to influence like weight gain and weight loss the most, reducing that would be where I would start. And it might actually mean like increasing a little protein just to keep yourself feeling a little fuller between meals, so you're not going to eat as much
Yeah.
and want to snack as much. So a lot of it, has to do around your appetite and how you can regulate appetite. So as we said in the beginning, if you fill your stomach with a larger volume of lower calorie food, it's going to help you lose weight. If you're filling your stomach with a large amount of high calorie foods, typically going to make you gain weight. So, there's definitely fluctuation to it, but those are
Yeah.
some good general
So
rules to
throughout
look
this
at.
episode, we've talked a lot about different ways nutrition can help recovery because everybody I've ever talked to about recovery, especially with golf, say sleep and nutrition are the two biggest factors. So we've talked a lot about it, but are there any things we haven't discussed that you should build into your plan to really optimize recovery?
Um, so I guess I would definitely agree that sleep and nutrition are going to be the two biggest things. So talking about recovery and a lot of like the processes that go into repairing muscle tissue, a lot of that's happening when you're sleeping. So definitely making sure you get adequate sleep. It's just allowing time for all those things to occur. If you're short on sleep, it's going to hinder a lot of those things. It's going to throw off the balance of your hormones and how your body regulates them, and then that's going to affect everything like your appetite, your energy levels, your mood. If you're not getting a lot of sleep, it's going to throw your mood off. Maybe you don't want to train the next day. So I think those are the two most obvious ones. But I think a big one that might not be talked about as much is your stress level, and minimizing like your daily stress levels. So when we're exercising, like your central nervous system, which kind of regulates like everything going on, how we move, and how your brain functions and everything. It's pretty
Mm-hmm.
charged up during exercise. You're getting a lot of stimulation. So I would encourage like athletes or people that train hard to like have some kind of, and I guess this kind of fits into the whole like recovery and rest portion, but try to have an activity where you can kind of just not only like physically detune, but like mentally detune. Maybe that's reading a book, maybe that's meditating, or just, like going on a leisurely walk out in nature and clearing your head. But I think kind of like detuning your central nervous system, kind of like, kind of taking your brain away from all that stimulation you're getting and just doing things that just kind of help you relax. When you're at rest, your parasympathetic nervous system takes over more and it kind of just slows things down. Your body can focus more on digestion because it's not diverting as much
Right.
energy to physical activity. So when you're, training hard, in your downtime, like just try to find activities that bring you personal enjoyment that can kind of like calm you down and just kind of reduce your overall stress level. Because if, let's say you're training hard, you're in school, you're working a part time job, and you're finding very little time to kind of, relax, and like find time, your just quiet time to yourself. It's gonna like start to wear on your body after a while because it's going to affect certain hormones that get released in your body, like cortisol. That's going to kind of like when your body's really stressed out, it releases a lot of cortisol, which kind of like gets your body like kind of jacked up and kind of like gets you ready for being able to respond to whatever's coming on. So you want to do things to kind of tune that down and just kind of be able to relax and just like let all those processes in your body like let more energy go towards digestion and just relaxing. So maybe it's watching a movie, maybe it's hanging out with family, but I would encourage people to kind of do things like that to kind of just mentally de-stress, and sometimes just bringing down your overall stress level will go a long way. Then your body can divert more energy to other things, and just give you a little bit more personal satisfaction throughout your day. So I think when you're the high demands of a sport can just put a lot of stress on us, both physically but emotionally. Maybe you had a bad round the last time you were out and it's like really getting to you. Just go do something that's going to get your mind off it so you're not like obsessing over, and not, you're going to have to, I think it is good to obviously analyze around, think about what went wrong, what could have went better, but you definitely need to program time where you're just not thinking about any of that and just going and doing something you enjoy that's going to kind of bring your stress level down and just,
Yeah.
allow you to relax a little bit. I think that's something that's sometimes
Yeah,
understated
and
that can go a
that's
long way
really
for people.
important in golf, and it's why golf is such a psychological sport. Is you're spending it's one of the few sports where you're spending a lot more time at the sport or in the tournament than actually playing the shots. It's not a reactive
Hmm.
sport,
Yeah.
which gives you more time to think, which isn't always a good thing. So that's definitely a key there.
Yeah, a lot of strategizing, I'm sure, when you're out there, like thinking about your next hole and where your score is at, and how your score is stacking
Right.
up against your other competitors. So I think golf, you're kind of always thinking, and you're kind of methodically trying to figure out like what you need to do on the next round, and that alone can just use up a lot of your energy. I think that's sometimes downplayed. We think about how much energy we expend physically, but when you're thinking really hard, I'm sure we've all, anyone listening to this has gone through it, whether you're preparing for an exam or, some kind of event where you're just putting so much mental energy towards it
Hmm.
that it starts to drain you after a while. And then that's going to affect your physical performance, where you just get to this point where you're so mentally taxed out that you're just like, I can't like stare at this anymore. I can't think about this. So, finding ways to calm the nervous system down. And that could even be like within a round, let's say, like, all right, like maybe you had a bad hole, you're getting ready to go to the next hole, and you're like kind of like working yourself up, like doing some things like a deep breathing exercise, or maybe, if you can take a minute to just close your eyes, take some deep breaths, kind of slow things down and just, allow your body to kind of mentally recover. I think there's some important strategies that you can kind of work into
Yeah.
both on and off the course.
So back with recovery, are there any foods other than processed foods you should avoid? Like I guess a better way of saying it is inflammatory foods beyond processed foods, because ultimately the
Mm-hmm.
goal of recovery is reducing inflammation.
Sure. Yep. Yep. So yeah, you got to definitely bring the inflammation down in the body. I would stay away from a lot of like your
Okay.
seed and plant oils. They've been shown to cause a lot of inflammation in the body. So things like canola oils, seed oils like sunflower seed oil, a lot of that stuff. It's just not good for the body. And like things like palm oil, coconut oils, like coconut's not quite as bad, but like the other ones I just mentioned can cause a lot of inflammation in the body. Sugar is a big one, like especially like the processed sugar. I would say mainly just try to stay away from like those heavy like seed oils and sugar. That can go a long way for you. But again, it goes back to just trying to look for the more natural whole food sources. But from avoiding things, I would just try to avoid. I think the processed food covers a lot of it, and those seed oils
Yeah.
are processed, so um, that they fall in that category, I guess, as well. But anything that's just really loaded with sugar. Look at labels. That's another thing that probably should have mentioned earlier. Like really, like look at what's on the label. If you look at the list and like the ingredients looks like a novel,
Yeah.
it's probably not that good for you, right? Like, there's a lot of ingredients that like have these weird chemically sounding names. Try to avoid stuff like that. Like look for, like for instance, you look at like just a natural peanut butter. Most of it is just going to say
Right.
like salt and peanuts, and that's really like a lot of that's going into it. So it's fewer ingredients is good general rule of thumb. The fewer the ingredients,
Yeah.
probably the better it is for your body, because it's going to be more close to its natural state, and things that are closer to the natural state are just easier for your body to digest, and they're not going to
Yeah.
cause as much inflammation in the body. So yeah, just avoiding like a lot of your sugars and those oils, I think are
And
a
then
good
with
starting point.
sleep being the other critical factor for recovery, is there anything you can do in your nutrition to
Hmm.
benefit your sleep?
Yeah, I would avoid like eating, within like probably 2 hours before bed. Definitely like especially if you're going to eat a big dinner, try to do that at least like if you can 3 hours before you're going to go to bed. Which I know can be difficult. Again, kind of modern society, we're very busy. There's a lot going on. Sometimes it's not ideal, but I would definitely try not to eat a large meal before, too close to bedtime, because your body needs to digest it. One, your body then is not going to be able to put as much energy into your recovery and repairing muscle tissue, because now you just ate a large meal and you go lay down. Now your body's going to have to digest that. And then also just thinking about sleep, like we can digest easier, like our digestive tract runs vertically through our body. Now if you eat a large meal and you go lay
Yeah.
down horizontally on a bed or a couch or whatever, it's just going to be harder for your body to digest, and it could cause things like indigestion. It could cause some stomach acids to back up. So definitely don't eat too close to bedtime. And um, if you are going to eat later at night, I would try to go for like more like protein or even like healthier fat sources, and try to avoid like a lot of your like simple or like simple carb or high carb foods before bed, because it's going to spike your blood sugar. Anytime you eat a carbohydrate, especially like a simple carbohydrate, like something that's more sugar based, drives your blood sugar up. Then your body has to release it. So insulin, we didn't talk a whole lot about, but insulin is what your body releases to clear glucose out of your blood. And then if you're like doing a lot of physical activity, a lot of that insulin gets taken up by your muscles, and that helps clear it from the bloodstream. But if you just eat a large carbohydrate meal, maybe that's a snack, or eating dinner, like a high carb dinner too close to bedtime, it's going to spike your blood sugar up. And then if you're not going and doing something physical, like your glucose is going to stay elevated for a while, and that insulin is going to be circulating in your bloodstream. So I would, if you are going to have like a later night snack, some of the things I work on with nutrition clients who have like trouble with like late night snacking, like maybe just do like a little protein shake where you just do maybe like a scoop of whey protein, like a little almond milk, and maybe like a tiny scoop of peanut butter with like some ice, and blend that up. And yeah, it would be ideal to just not have that, but as opposed to eating like something real sugary or like super high carb, like I would prefer people do that. It will give you a little satiation. It's not going to completely derail you, but it'll give you like, a little bit of the whatever sweetness or whatever you're craving. So, that could be a good strategy, but I think that's where a lot of people suffer, is kind of like late night snacking and eating too close to bed, and then it's going to affect your sleep. You're probably going to have a tough time falling asleep because your body's going to be trying to digest. And even if you do fall asleep, you're not going to get, your body's not going to be able to repair that muscle tissue as adequately and let you recover. So, I would just try to avoid eating too
So
close to
I've got a few
bedtime.
questions here to finish us off that I ask everybody who comes on the podcast.
Sure.
So my first question is, what are some of your favorite books to recommend?
Um, just general, or just
Any
in
book.
terms of like training, or just anything? Uh, I'm trying to think, what have I read lately that's good? Uh, so jogging my memory here.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's kind of open-ended question. There's a good book. If you're kind of thinking the nutritional realm, a guy named Tim Ferriss wrote a good book called The 4 Hour Body. Basically built around, it's a good nutritional and lifestyle book, kind of helps teach people a little bit about nutrition, how to exercise, and really how to like, I think it's good for like
Mm-hmm.
the busy individual who's like really pressed for time and might not have like a ton of time to work out nutrition. That's a really good one. Will kind of help you try to like structure like eating with exercise, and really having how to get the most out of like only being able to work out for short periods of time. So in the nutrition realm, that's a good one. If you like self help books or things that are gonna like kind of motivation, I read a couple that I read this year that I really like. Ed Milet wrote a good book called The Power of One More, which is basically like just looking at like how can you just look at each day
Mm-hmm.
and just do a little bit more to be successful. Whether that could be with anything, your nutrition, your training, even things just education, religion, like all things, like how can you just kind of do like a little bit more to make yourself a better person and be able to kind of contribute that to all aspects of your life. There's another good one I wrote called Relentless, which is the guy's name's escaping me,
Okay.
but he was Michael Jordan's trainer throughout his career. And God, that's really crushing me. His name's not coming to mind, but just really good book on mindset, and just how to really set yourself up to be, as the book says, relentless as you can towards your training, towards life, towards everything. Um, that's a really good one. And yeah, I would say off the
Yeah.
top of my head, those are what's coming
Yeah.
to mind right
And
now.
then my other question is, if you could give only one nutritional tip to golfers trying to get their game to the next level, what would that tip be?
Um, I would say just really build a good plan for yourself and like just try to really build
Hmm.
like look at your entire schedule, all your training, all your events, and really kind of not just like look at the content of your food, but kind of look at like when you're going to eat breakfast, when you're going to eat lunch, when you're going to eat dinner, and just kind of really map out your entire schedule and just try to like build a plan. Sometimes nutrition is less about like just thinking about the macros, the micros, all that stuff, and really like are you going to structure and like build your like meals around your schedule and like making sure that you're going to get adequate calories. It's obviously important the content of your meals, but I would say plan and plan. So like know like what your season's going to be, when your practices are going to be, when all your events are going to be, and then as we mentioned earlier, like start doing research like when your events are, and just really look at how you can set it up to make yourself the most successful. That might mean
Hmm.
learning a few new cooking skills. That might mean just doing like a little of your own research to like just kind of see what you can do to further your performance. But really, just build that meal plan and then just really focus on your carbohydrate and protein intake, making sure that you're structuring most of your diet around healthy whole foods, and just try to really make sure you're getting the adequate proportions. So use those hand guide scales that we mentioned throughout this podcast, and just really try to plan ahead. Kind of if you're young and your parents are preparing a lot of your meals, kind of work with them and kind of talk about like what they might need to cook for you, or if you're older and you're making your own meals. Either work with a nutritionist or do what you need to do, on your own research to really kind of, you know, just prepare healthy meals for yourself. Or if you don't want to do that, there's a ton of different meal services out there, Blue Apron, HelloFresh, that they can send healthy meals right to your doorstep. Going to cost you a little more, but if that's what you need to do to be successful, if you're just not going to cook it or prepare it on your own, that's another option. But try to eat those healthy whole foods as much as possible at all your meals, and just plan as much as you can. And I think that
Yeah.
will
So
go a
I
long
feel
way
like
for
we've had
people.
a fantastic conversation, a lot of really, really good insights here. Where can people who want to work with you virtually or learn more about you find you?
So you can go to my website, intuitiveroots.com. I'm also on Instagram under intuitive_roots, and you can always directly email me as well. I mean, I have some contact information
Yep.
on my website, so I guess that's a good start. But if you're on Instagram or Facebook, I have Intuitive Roots Facebook page, Instagram, or my email. It's just Ben, two N's, at intuitiveroots.com. You can always shoot me an email. Be happy to help. And even if it's something, I'm always happy to answer people's questions. Like even if you don't want to actually like do any services, I'm always happy to help. So if you have a question and maybe you don't want to like commit to training or anything, but you just want to pick my brain, feel free to email me. I'll try to answer everyone's questions as best I can.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Perfect Par podcast. You can find out more about my guest in this episode and where you can find them in the episode description. You can also find out more about me and shorter podcast clips on my Instagram at carter.stroup or my Twitter at Carter Stroup.